Benvinguts i benvingudes a totes. Estem a la jornada d'alternatives en plàstics dins el cicle de jornades sobre insums controvertits, en el marc del projecte europeu Organic Plus, del qual l'Escola Agrària Manresa en forma part juntament amb altres entitats europees. Welcome everybody to the conference Alternatives in Plastics Inside the Cycle of Conference on Contentious Inputs in the framework of the European Project Organic Plus. In which l'Escola Agrària de Manresa is part together with other European entities. Els vídeos que veureu a continuació són tots en anglès i subtitulats al català i al final, cap a les 11:15 més o menys, hi haurà un torn de preguntes per tots vosaltres a través del xat, que també seran traduïts, es connectaran als ponents i serà traduït en directe per tots vosaltres. The videos are in English with Catalan subtitles, and there will be a round of questions at the end around 11:15 with all the speakers. Les presentacions estaran disponibles al RuralCat a partir del mes de juliol. All the presentations and the videos will be available at RuralCat, at the web of RuralCat at the month of July. Només dir-vos que aquest primer vídeo és una introducció al projecte Organic Plus, dura uns 10-12 minuts, i els que us heu connectat a altres jornades, segur que l'heu sentit perquè a cada inici de jornada fem servir el mateix. This first video is an introduction to the Organic Plus project from its leader, Ulrich Schmutz, and the ones that had assist to other conferences you have already heard. Per últim, us recordem que totes aquestes sessions són gravades. Finally, we remind you that all these sessions are being recorded. Espero que us agradin i parlem al final de la sessió. I hope you enjoy it and we talk at the end of the session. Thank you. Gràcies.
Hello and welcome to this introduction of our international course in contentious inputs in organic agriculture. It's held at the Escola Agrària de Manresa in Catalonia, and I will give you the introduction. My name is Ulrich Schmutz and I'm the coordinator of the Organic Plus project. I'm also a professor at Coventry University. We have a center, it's called Rayns Organic Gardens, and it's a center for agroecology, water and resilience. So you find my details there. And I will give you a little bit of an overview of this course, so then you have a good way into it in the following sessions. So welcome again. So we are a team of two large EU-funded projects called RELAX and Organic Plus. I'm the leader of one of them. Lucius Tamm is the leader of the second one. And together we had 8 million euros funding of 4 years. And we are now in our final year, and we have a lot of results to share with you, but we haven't solved all the issues. So I want to give you a little bit of a issue where we are now. Organic farming has phased out contentious input a long time ago. It's something which has been done, and it's part of the DNA of organic movement. So it started with phasing out chemical fossil fuel fertilizers. We don't use them, and that's part of the organic regulation. We have phased out synthetic fossil fuel-based pesticides. There's also no GMOs. And there's also quite strict regulation on animal cruelty, or on a positive word, how to care about animals. So the word organic or agroecology, biological agriculture, aims to be a fairer, more ecological, more caring and healthier system innovation. These are also the principles of the organic movement. However, it is not perfect. So we need further improvements to organic. We can't just stay there. And this is in some way the kind of organic plus principle which we want to share with you, and which you also as a farmer or advisor, are part of in a way to continuously improve organic. So I'm going a little bit back in a way to set the context of this course. So let's go just back before we look forward. So organic started almost 100 years now with a movement called organic biological farming and also biodynamic farming. So we go back quite a long time. There's a lot of history there. And then in 72, there was formation of an international, so both of those earlier things were a bit more in Central Europe, Switzerland, and what is now Poland. And then there was an international movement, the International Federation of Organic Agricultural Movements, that was founded in Paris. And this was a time before there was regulation on organic farming. And this came in Europe and in the EU in 1991. And ever since, regulation has been done. So our work, in a way, is to look where we are now. So are we in this year, 2022? We have just had an updated regulation on organic farming, and obviously, I have to say that there is also a big war, obviously, now going on in the center of Europe, which is also an issue of some of the contentious inputs we say later, especially oil and minerals. But we'll move on with that and want to look more forward. So what was the project about? So looking forward is going to 2030. So we will have an official target from the Green Deal of the European Commission that we will have we aim for 25% organic land use in the EU. This is quite a big aim. Some countries like Germany, Austria, some smaller ones, they aim even further for 30%, and some of them have already achieved that. Liechtenstein, I think, is the highest, over 40%. So this is the big setup where we are in. And going now into the course, as I mentioned, we have those two projects. You can see their title. They both have a website where you can study and Google that in more detail. And both projects were kind of organized a little bit. We knew each other already that we were applying. It is still competitive, and other projects were not funded, but we try to be very synergistic always, so that we can kind of, in combination, can solve these issues of contentious input. So your whole course now will then tackle the contentious inputs we see now in organic farming and how we can overcome them in detail. So we have to go into the detail of copper. We have to go into the detail of mineral oils. We will present you experiments, not everything we have done in this course, but just selected information and results on that. And then we will go in the following days, we will hear more about vegan fertilizers, you will hear more about peat and the replacement of peat, you will hear more about plastic use. All of these are identified contentious inputs. And then we have a big section also on livestock farming, because there we have also a lot of contentious inputs, synthetic vitamins, antibiotics, anthelmintics, so this is the treatment against worms, and also the animal bedding, which is often with conventional straw, which then has the pesticides in it as well. And we are concerned about the animals eating them, but also contamination. We also had a big part of research on social science. We're not covering that in this course, but we will work also on the modeling, on the phase out. So you will get information on the life cycle assessment and the social assessment, social economic assessment of the alternatives, and how we can model the phase out. So this is a little bit, and we follow this same template in all the different sections you have. And then you obviously have also 2 days of on-farm visits, because all this information needs to be put in practical, real farming changes, because otherwise it doesn't really make any difference to the environment and has limited or no input, which is obviously impact, which is important. So based on the information and the work we are doing, looking at alternatives, we then make recommendations mainly to the European Union and also other sector bodies who may have standards, when to phase out some of these remaining identified contentious inputs. So for example, and this is not, it's like a planning tool here, it is not the final answer, but we think the phase out has to be staggered. So some of the things we can phase out fairly quickly. For others, we need at least 10 years more time, research, alternatives need to be prepared. We don't want to ruin the organic movement by going too fast, but also we want to reach 30% or 25% in the next decade. So we need to do that in a growing market. And then there's others like antibiotics, which may take even longer to completely phase out. However, that may actually not be true, because depending on the research we do, it could actually also change. So this is another overview. So, and I also will finally end that we also already, because we are at the end of the project, we are thinking about the next steps. So I call them phase out mission proposals. So we want to have further research commissioned by the EU, and that hasn't been done yet. Also parts of it have. And they would be slightly different, because our work we're showing you was work which was more commissioned in research labs and trial sites. And this wider phase out would be even more connected to farmers. We already connected a lot to farmers in our project, but an innovation action would also include farmers as micro enterprises. So then we can do commission trials on farms, so that everyone is kind of has help in a way to try the alternatives and also create. We will hear, this is another word I haven't mentioned yet. For some of them, we also think you need a system solution, which means a redesign of the organic system, which in many cases is a little bit, what I could say, old-fashioned, because it was converted from conventional farming. So we have a system like in apple trees, citrus, which worked really well under the planting densities of conventional agriculture. Then it was converted to organic, and now it doesn't really work so well. So we need to have a system redesign, including agroforestry and mixed farming, so we get a whole new system where we don't have these problems. And this is all from me now. So I thank you for your attention up to now. So I would say, please enjoy the course, and obviously some of you may be more interested in horticulture and other more in livestock, and that's clear. But I think this project has also helped, because it has so many issues, help bring the organic movement together and remind everyone that there is this interconnection between mixed farming, livestock, and even in horticulture, where you can do that. And then my final word is, please also take some action. Do some experiments on your farm, try some of these alternatives, and see how how it goes. And then I hope we can create an organic plus system, a world almost, where we do not need all these fossil fuel products. Obviously, a main thing is also the climate change. Heat, for example, if we don't use it, we can protect all the peat bogs on our planet, and they have an enormous potential to mitigate climate change. So it may look like a small step for you on your farm, but it is actually quite important to come to this bioeconomy or cyclical economy, as we call it, on a larger scale. So thank you again for your interest in this, and I hope you enjoy the course. Bye.
Hello, I'm Judith Conroy from Coventry University in the UK, and I'm going to introduce the topic of plastics in agriculture and plastic mulches and discuss why they are contentious and what the issues are. So first of all, I think it's important to say why we use plastics so much in agriculture and in general. I mean, plastics really are amazing materials. They've got several properties that make them very, very versatile. They can be built to be very durable. Generally, they're cheap to manufacture. They have a wide range of physical properties, so they can be flexible sheets, they can be rigid and very strong, they can be made into geotextiles that can be woven. And in the photograph we've got on this slide, that shows Mypex, or another brand of woven geotextile that's used in that way. There's a very broad range of uses. They're used in medicine, they're used in all walks of life really, and they tend to be quite lightweight compared to most other materials as well. Specifically in agriculture and with mulches, synthetic fossil-derived plastic mulches can provide effective weed control. They can reduce the need for labour, which can be costly to the producer. In conventional agriculture, they prevent the need for herbicides potentially, and they can help to help the soil to retain moisture, particularly in warmer climates. And there are certain pests which they can be effective against as well. So they really are very versatile. And in agriculture, quite a lot of materials that would have once been made from biodegradable materials, such as woven baskets, crates, things made from materials like willow and hazel, we now have plastic replacements for them, which are potentially more long-lived or more suitable. And in terms of other materials as well. So we've got a lot of plastics now that do jobs that couldn't be done before. So we didn't really have any materials that would have been suitable as a film mulch. We couldn't have things like polytunnels before we had plastics in agriculture. So they really have changed things quite a lot for us. Some of the specific uses of plastics in agriculture I've popped on this slide here, so that there really is a lot of things like tree protectors, lots of crop covering, so mesh, fleece, things like that. And also in terms of the next steps, so food packaging, so bags for things, airtight bags, punnets for things like strawberries. Plastic really is everywhere in agriculture and in horticulture as well. But really for the Organic Plus project, we had to hone in on one particular area. So we looked at the issue of plastic mulches. We decided that this was quite problematic because it's plastic that's right in contact with the soil, so it can be a source of contamination. So there's really different sizes of contamination depending on what we're looking at. So the first thing is the very tiny things, so chemicals which can leach from the plastic, so chemicals which are used in the manufacture, and also things which are present in the plastic because it's a fossil fuel derived material. So that's things like phthalates, and there have been studies done, particularly in places like China, where they've been using plastic mulches for more intensively for longer than in European countries. So there are chemicals such as phthalates which can build up in the soil and also get into the crop as well. Next size up from that, but still quite small, is microplastics. So something that we've all become a lot more familiar with in recent years, tiny fragments of plastic, which again can end up in the soil, which can end up in soil organisms and larger animals, and again in the crop. And once they've gone from the soil, they can then leach out and end up in watercourses. So yeah, microplastics are a big issue. And then larger plastic fragments, so pieces of the mulch, and once it starts to break down, most fossil-derived plastic mulch tends to break down in the sunlight, so it's quite photodegradable. So while the crop's still in place, pieces of the mulch might become detached. They might end up in hedgerows and blow away onto roads. So it looks messy, but it's also a physical danger to wild animals, and it's another source of plastic pollution. So although plastic mulches are very, very effective for farmers, they do help to control weeds, keep moisture in, they also present a problem to the farmer in terms of their removal and their disposal. It can be quite hard to lift the mulch from the soil once it's started to break down. It kind of gets brittle and it breaks into fragments, and it really does present the farmer with a problem. And very often it's not possible to recycle the plastic because there's lots of soil, or if it is recycled, then a lot of water has to be used to wash it. And very often, once it's been removed, if indeed it is possible to remove it all, then a lot of plastic mulch ends up being burned or going to landfill. And when it is recycled, it's costly in terms of money and also in terms of resources. So that's one of the biggest problems. Another issue is purely that it is a product of the petrochemical industry. So it does take quite a lot of energy to manufacture it and to transport it. And there is an argument to say that, you know, we've only got a certain amount of oil, and we need to minimise our carbon dioxide emissions, and maybe we should be reserving this finite resources for more targeted uses, such as for medicine and, you know, lots of the equipment that we need to produce, and, you know, we should limit our use. So in terms of the alternatives to plastic mulch, as my colleagues will explain, one of the main things that we've looked at within the project is biodegradable mulches. So mulches which are made from things like cornstarch or from potato starch, so things that will naturally degrade, you know, back into organic compounds, and that won't present a plastic problem. There are other biodegradable coverings which aren't films, so that would be things like cardboard and paper, and they can be used in conjunction with other materials, so possibly things like grass clippings or extruded wood or hay, which could be placed over the paper, or again, they could be used on their own, as well as loose mulches. And then there are other solutions as well, so not just mulch, that's not the only way to keep weeds down. And some of these other methods are older historic methods that we've used for centuries, such as human labour. But there are also more modern and more technological solutions, so things like machine vision and mechanical weeding. So we have got technology which is increasingly capable to recognise weeds and to remove them mechanically. Just a little bit more background and a few points on this slide for further reading. So I just thought it was important to make the point that plastic mulch, they have been used for many decades, but it's really just in the last 10 to 20 years that their use has really increased in the 21st century, really. And it's estimated that 83,000 tonnes of plastic mulch were sold in the EU in 2019. That's the most recent year we've got the statistics for. And overall plastic waste in agriculture in 2011 is estimated to be over 1.3 million tonnes, and I suspect it has increased because that's the trend. Also on this slide, we've got a few links as well. We've got an EIP Agri report in particular, which is quite useful. So if you do want to do more reading around the topic, then we would suggest having a look at those, and also a recent UN report, which has some quite stark findings about plastic pollution, particularly in farming. So that's the end of my part of the presentation. Thank you very much for listening. And if you have any questions, then please let us know at the end. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Francis Rayns. I'm a researcher at Coventry University in the United Kingdom, and I'm going to talk to you today about alternatives to the plastic mulches in organic agriculture that have been investigated within the Organic Plus project. we've been looking at alternatives, particularly to fossil fuel derived plastic mulches. So these are non-biodegradable mulches that have lots of detrimental environmental impacts. And we've been looking at alternatives to these with respect to how well they can suppress weeds, what the effects are on crop yield and quality, how rapidly they might degrade in the field, whether there's any release of plasticizers or other harmful chemicals into the soil, whether there are any effects on soil health, the microorganisms or other soil animals in the soil, and also to look at the wider environmental impact of each of the alternatives using particularly life cycle assessment. So within this work, we set up replicated field experiments in 2019 and 2020 in the UK and also in Turkey, so very different environmental conditions. And we used onions, cabbages and peppers as test crops, as you can see illustrated in the pictures here. And I'll say a bit more about the details of those trials shortly. We also have been working in the UK with an organisation called Innovative Farmers, which is an organisation that facilitates participatory research. They've got a website that you might find interesting to look at, and there's lots of reports on there on matters to do with other aspects of sustainable agriculture more generally. But particularly with the subject that we're talking about today, we set up what is known as a field lab with a group of vegetable and fruit growers who were all keen to explore how the use of conventional plastic mulches could be reduced. And you can see here in the illustration a picture of one of our meetings. So we had a series of sessions where we all got together and talked about the issues, and some of the growers went ahead and did their own on-farm trials, and so that information supports the replicated sort of more academic trials that I'm going to tell you about today. This is just an example of the layout of the trials. You can see we used plots which were one bed wide, one tractor bed wide by 4 meters long. There were 4 replicates, so we can do proper statistics to be kind of really sure of the results. And in each trial, we had 8 treatments, which included unmulched controls, which were either weeded or non-weeded. We used various different non-biodegradable plastics and biodegradable plastics, both those which were commercially available and non-commercially available, innovative plastics which were developed by our partners in Poland. We basically did the same work in 2020 and in 2019. There was a few slight differences. The Polish partner developed a new material called Cut 3 rather than Cut 2. And in the second year, we used a commercial paper mulch rather than one of the fossil fuel derived plastic mulches, but I'll say a little bit more about that when we get to the results. And in Turkey, they also had similar treatments, but they included a chopped olive pruning treatment as part of their trials. So these are just some results. In the UK, in the onion trial, you can see on the left, this is a kind of a general view of the trials shortly after they were set up. And by June, there were significant amounts of weeds that emerged in the unweeded controls and also in the white mulches. These were the Cut 1 and Cut 2 produced from Poland. You can see there in the picture, there was a real mass of weeds which grew underneath those mulches, and these eventually tore open, and the weeds just overwhelmed the crop in those innovative mulches. That wasn't so successful. You can see here the picture is what happens a little bit later in the season. This is kind of just before the onions were harvested. You can see the unweeded control plots there, very weedy. In the other plots, the onions had fallen over, were drying in the field, ready for harvest. The graph at the top shows that all the black mulches, whether they were biodegradable or not, were very effective in suppressing the weeds until harvest. whereas the white mulches and the unweeded controls were not. And after harvest, we left the mulches in the field for a little bit longer, and the polythene films, they began to disintegrate across the plots, whereas in contrast, the biodegradable ones sort of came loose along the edges because they decomposed, particularly where they were in the soil. So there was like slight different pattern between the mulches into how they disintegrated. And of course, the polythene film just broke down into scraps, which would have just been impossible to remove from the field on a commercial scale. So that just shows how undesirable it is to use single-use polythene as a weed suppression technique. At harvest, we can see that the graph on the left is the yield of the onions, and you can see there was a good yield in all the plots where the weed control was effective. The amount of weed biomass you can see there particularly high in the unweeded controls, and the where we had a white mulch. In the second year, in 2020, there was actually a much better yield from all the mulch plots, all the black mulch plots, than in the weeded control, and this is possibly because the mulches had an effect on conserving moisture in the soil. We laid them down just after a period of heavy rain and before several weeks of no rain at all, and I think the mulches really helped conserve the moisture in the soil and stimulated the growth of the onions. So it just goes to show that we sort of came about this project thinking particularly using mulches for weed control, but obviously they can bring other benefits as well, and conservation of water is certainly one of them. In cabbages, the overall weed pressure was less than in the onion trial, and the white mulches degraded less rapidly, partly because they were protected by the cabbage crop itself. So the cabbages, their sort of vulnerable phase in which they're susceptible to weed competition is much shorter than it is with onions. You can see here a picture that's taken a little bit later in the year. You can see the unweeded control plots there, in contrast to the good weed control in all the other pictures. So it's slightly different situation in cabbages and onions. This is just a picture from the Turkish trial where they carried out something very similar. Again, you can see they had problems with the white mulch disintegrating. They found that the best results, the highest cabbage yields, were from the polythene plots. Interestingly, they also used olive prunings as a mulch, as a naturally sourced mulch, which you can see in this picture in the top right there, and that did very well as well, almost as good as the polythene, and better than the biodegradable mulches. And again, probably in the Turkish climate, moisture conservation was probably a very important factor, because the weeded control, which you can see here second on the left, did very poorly in terms of yield. Peppers are a very similar pattern there. Black mulches, both biodegradable and polythene, were most effective. The olive prunings didn't do quite so well there in this case. So that's all about the film mulches. Just to go on to say something about what we called loose mulches, where we conducted trials in 2020 and in 2021. And this was something that really came out of our work with the Innovative Farmers group. Many of the members of that were very keen to look at the use of on-farm derived materials, so not being reliant on buying in a commercial film mulch for various reasons, partly because of cost, partly because of resilience, I think that was kind of came about sort of concerns of that with COVID and disruptions of supply chains, partly with it fitting better into the sort of organic ethos of using natural materials and locally sourced materials. So you can see here a picture on the right of the of what we call the loose mulch trial that we set up, and we investigated a number of different materials. We had poplar chips or extruded poplar. And this was a material, this is a poplar that had been put through a machine that kind of tears the wood fibers apart and makes it into a material that can have other uses in agriculture also, that we've been looking at either in as animal bedding or as an ingredient of a peat alternative compost. So the whole idea of extruded materials is quite interesting. So those are two treatments we had there. We also had willow chips, another species of wood there that's kind of believed to have beneficial effects on plant diseases. We looked at green waste compost made from parks and gardens waste, grass clippings, which can obviously be sourced on farm, and also hay. So the grass clippings are like the fresh grass in contrast to the hay, which was dried conserved grass. We laid all those out again in a replicated trial. We used two rates of mulches, either 30 litres per metre squared or 15 litres per metre squared. And looking at the graphs here, the first thing to say is that really only the high rate mulches were effective. And in the first year that we did the work, the hay was the best material for weed suppression. Some of the other materials were good early on, but really by a month after laying, their effectiveness broke down. And in all cases, the mulches were effective against annuals, but perennial weeds, we had particular issues with docks and thistles. They just tended to break through the mulch. And then obviously a small number of individual plants grow quite big and present a big problem with competition. Looking at the effect of crop performance in 2021, we used onions as a test crop. Here you can see the yield of the onions, and somewhat disappointingly, perhaps by far and away the best yields were from the polythene and the biodegradable plastic. So the film mulches rather than the loose mulches were by far and away the most effective materials, and this really was because of the effect of the perennials, particularly the thistles. I think maybe in another field, in other situations where where there's a different weed profile, if the annual weeds are dominated, that might not be so. The loose mulches might have been better. One also interesting thing was that I said that in 2020 the hay was the best loose mulch in terms of suppressing weeds. When we came to do the trial again in 2021, the batch of hay that we used contained a lot of weed seeds, a lot of particularly plantain seeds that really rapidly established and led to a significant problem in their own right. So maybe that just indicates that if people are going to use these loose mulches, they need to sort of check the source of the material, and maybe the hay could have been heat treated or something like that to get rid of the weed. But I think it's certainly an interesting idea to use the loose mulches, and something that more work is needed on. With the loose mulches, there's obviously an impact on soil fertility, because some of the materials will bring in nutrients, particularly things like the grass will bring in a lot of nitrogen. Others, things like the wood chip, could possibly deplete the soil of nitrogen if there might be an issue of nitrogen robbery as they start to decompose. And so we measured the mineral nitrogen in the soil beneath the mulches. Interestingly, by the time of the onion harvest, the two highest mineral nitrogens were beneath the fill mulches, and I think that probably is because there was less leaching away of those nutrients, so the mineral nitrogen had accumulated there. So that's another interesting effect. And just to sum up, these are my conclusions from our work. Black mulches, all the black mulches, whether they're biodegradable or not, effectively suppressed weeds whilst the crops are growing. But even the white ones, even though, and this would apply to other things, not just because they're white, but even mulches that break down before the end of the growing season could be worthwhile in some crops, but not so much in others. After harvest, the polythene film, the non-biodegradable polythene film, rapidly disintegrated. So this is sort of photodegradation, just broke down physically into big pieces. In contrast to that, the woven polypropylene film remained intact and of course could be used again in other years. Fragments of the biodegradable mulches did persist on the surface of the soil for months afterwards. If they're incorporated into the soil, that's not so much of an issue, but it does show that it does really need to be mixed into the soil for it to biodegrade. And finally, the loose mulches can offer an on-farm alternative to films, but really need to be applied at a high rate in order to be effective. And this can have effects on soil nutrient dynamics. Thank you for your attention. And if you've any questions, please put them in the question section at the end of the session. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Krystyna Malińska, and I'm a researcher and a university professor at Częstochowa University of Technology in Poland. Today, I'm going to talk about alternatives to other plastics from fossil fuels in organic agriculture. In Organic Plus, we specifically looked into alternatives to fossil-derived plastic mulches that are used in organic agriculture. And our main goal was to develop biodegradable and bio-based plastic mulches, which will eventually phase out conventional plastics in organic agriculture. In addition to that, we also developed agricultural accessories like plant clips and supports, but this is something that was in addition to what we planned within the Organic Plus project. So in my presentation, I would like to share our experiences with developing and manufacturing biodegradable and bio-based plastic mulches that are specifically used for organic agriculture. In Organic Plus, we identified 3 problems to deal with in first place. So the problem number 1 was what we noticed was increasing quantities of non-biodegradable fossil-derived plastics in plastic waste in agriculture. So this kind of waste is actually very difficult in handling because of heavy contamination with soil, and therefore they cannot be easily recycled. Usually, as a common practice, this type of waste is landfilled or incinerated or even stored on farms. So that was problem number 2 that we identified. Problem number 3 was related to costs. We observed that high costs of biodegradable non-fossil derived plastics for agriculture. So to address these 3 problems, we proposed to develop biodegradable and bio-based plastic mulching films that would eventually decompose in soil or in composting and could replace conventional non-biodegradable fossil-derived plastic mulches. As I mentioned at the very beginning of my presentation, I would like to share our experiences with developing biodegradable and bio-based plastic mulches for Organic Plus. Just to clarify, as biodegradable, we mean plastics that undergo decomposition, biodegradation in different environments under different conditions. But biodegradable not necessarily mean that they are produced from non-fossil fuels. Also, bio-based plastics are plastics that are produced from biological resources, but they might not be actually biodegradable or compostable. So our goal was to develop something that would be bio-based and also biodegradable. So the scope of the work covered several phases. At the very beginning, we had to make the preparation for the whole process. So we looked into the requirements for biodegradable plastic mulches that are specifically used for organic agriculture. Then we had to decide on raw materials like biopolymers, fillers, pigments. Also, we had to produce testing samples, test them for physical, mechanical, thermal properties, and then we had to select the technology and also technological parameters. Then we produced biodegradable and bio-based plastic. So we did it on an industrial scale with the help of the industry partner. When we had plastic mulches ready to be used, we had to run lab scale testing. We tested chemical composition, we also tested mechanical, physical, and thermal properties, and we also tested biodegradability, compostability, and phytotoxicity of these plastic mulching films. Also, these plastic mulching films were tested in field trials, but this part is covered by other speakers within this course. The only thing that we did, we tested samples of mulching films or the residues of the mulching films taken from the field after the growing season was completed, and we also ran some tests to determine mechanical, physical, and thermal properties. So just to give you more details on these biodegradable and bio-based plastic mulches, I presented a table with specific characteristics. So we developed three different biodegradable and bio-based plastic mulches, referred to as CUT1, CUT2, and CUT3. The common thing for these films was the structure, which consisted of 3 layers. In case of CUT1, there were 3 layers, and they were produced from 2 types of raw material, which was commercially available bioplast, and the inner and the outer layer just differed in degradation time. For CUT, we added calcium carbonate as a filler. Also, in Organic Plus, we were trying to replace some portion of biodegradable polymers with waste-derived fillers, and we selected wood-derived biochar, but unfortunately, due to some technological problems related to size of biochar, we could not produce biodegradable and bio-based plastic mulches which would contain biochar. So we replaced biochar with calcium carbonate as a filler, which was produced from seashells, and we substituted a portion of biodegradable polymers with a filler. And the third type of biodegradable and bio-based plastic mulch that we developed at our university was CUT3, which was a little bit thicker than the previous 2, but it also contained a black pigment. So you can see these films on a slide. We used, as I already mentioned, we produced biodegradable and bio-based plastic mulches on an industrial scale with the help of the industry partner. We used extrusion blow molding technology, which is typical for this type of materials. And once these biodegradable and bio-based plastic mulches films were ready, we ran lab scale testing. So we tested mechanical, physical, and thermal properties just to make sure that the developed mulching films have the same quality as conventional ones, at least as conventional ones. Then we also determined chemical composition and biodegradation, disintegration, and phytotoxicity. These three were extremely important in terms of end-of-life management options, which we considered in-soil compost, in-soil degradation, and also composting. So biodegradation was determined by mass loss in composting conditions at 30 Celsius degrees for 48 weeks. And also industrial composting and home composting. These two differed in temperature and also time. And just to give you the idea of the results we got, I'm presenting the biodegradation results for the third biodegradable and bio-based mulching film, CUT3. And you can see that after that in home composting, after 48 weeks of home composting, mass loss was at 93%. And after 16 weeks of industrial composting, all biodegradable and bio-based plastic mulch decomposed. So this is a good indication of biodegradation in natural environment. As I already mentioned, these biodegradable and bio-based plastic mulching films, which we developed, were also tested in field trials. This part is covered by the other speakers during this course, but we also did a small experiment, and we tested these films in Poland in growing sunflowers. Other field trials were conducted in Turkey and in UK. Other than that, as I already mentioned, we looked into other options for biodegradable and bio-based agricultural accessories for organic agriculture. So we developed biodegradable and bio-based plastic plant supports and clips. This is something that we done in addition to what we planned within Organic Plus. So we produced supports and clips using different technology, but we added biochar as a filler. So also we used the same biopolymer, which was bioplast, commercially available, and we added 0.5% and 1% of biochar by mass. We also observed very good properties like mechanical, thermal, and physical properties. These supports and clips were also tested for biodegradation, compostability, and phytotoxicity. And we tested them in a greenhouse in Poland for growing tomatoes. We also tested one of the end-of-life management option, which was composting. So after tomatoes were harvested, we also collected plant residues with plant clips and supports. We mixed them with poultry manure, and we composted the composting mixture for 90 days. And after that, we observed very significant mass loss of these clips and supports. We also looked into other applications for biodegradable and bio-based mulching films that were developed in our university within the Organic Plus project. Well, just to clarify, we are all dog lovers here, and we thought that we could use mulching films for producing dog poop bags. So what we did, we produced these dog poop bags from these three biodegradable and bio-based plastic mulching films. And well, this experiment was actually described in a paper that was recently published, so you can have a look at our work. We also compared these dog poop bags which we produced with commercially available bio-based and biodegradable dog poop bags, and we did a composting experiment as a end-of-life management option. So what we did, we placed these bags in layers in a 60-liter composting reactors, and we composted them for 13 weeks in total, and these bags were with and without dog poop. And after four weeks, we observed a significant average mass loss of these bags for most of them. And after 13 weeks, all these bags decomposed entirely. However, the compost which we obtained, the fresh compost, did not demonstrate high quality. And to conclude my presentation, I would like to share some of our findings and conclusions. So definitely we can say that biodegradable and bio-based plastic mulching films, and also plant accessories like plant clips and supports, which we developed at our university with Thin Organic Plus, can be used for organic farming, and also they can be disposed of through mixing with soil in soil degradation, and also by composting with, for example, plant residues or other waste materials. The other thing that we've learned is that the whole process of designing, manufacturing, testing of biodegradable and bio-based products for agriculture is a complex process, and the number of aspects need to be taken into consideration. For example, such as availability and the origin of raw materials. Also fulfilling the requirements for the use in organic agriculture, then considering different production technologies and technological parameters, also testing and certification procedures, selected properties which are very important for end-of-life management, such as compostability and biodegradability, and also conditions and time frame for field testing and end-of-management options. We also learned that the biodegradable and bio-based plastic mulching films, which were developed within Organic Plus, could be used not only in organic agriculture, but they can also be used, for example, as a material for producing dog poop bags, which can be used by dog owners and be disposed of in environmental and sustainable manner. So thank you so much for your attention, and if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them during the Q&A session. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Erica Montemayor, and welcome to my presentation on the sustainability assessment of plastic mulch alternatives. So previously in one of my other presentations, I explained what is life cycle assessment and how we use it to estimate environmental impacts. So here in general, I'm going to explain one small thing about LCA. So life cycle assessment is the estimation of potential environmental impacts and resources used throughout a product's life cycle. So for example, we have the product, an apple, And we look at the environmental impact of that apple throughout its entire life cycle, from raw material extraction to all the activities on the field, the distribution, the consumption, and the final disposal of the waste from that apple. So we look at the entire life cycle using many different indicators such as climate change, eutrophication, particulate matter production, ozone depletion, and resource use. So that is in general what life cycle assessment is. But if you want more information regarding LCA methodology, please go to the presentation on the 7th of June for mineral oil by Erica Montemayor. In our case, we're looking at plastic mulch alternatives for tomato production. But to conduct an LCA, we need to define the goal and scope of the study. Part of this is outlined here, where the goal is to assess the environmental impact of greenhouse tomatoes using different types of mulching materials. We also define what's called the functional unit. It is a measure of the function of the studied system, and it provides a reference to which all the inputs and outputs and the final results can be referenced to. So in this case, the function is to produce organic cherry tomatoes, and its unit would be 1 ton. So we would look at the climate change potential per ton of organic cherry tomatoes. The data for the organic cherry tomatoes was provided from a farm in Almeria, Spain, and the greenhouses there. So to perform the life cycle assessment, we used the environmental footprint methodology, which is a Europe-specific methodology and is recommended by the United Nations Environment Programme and is created by the European Commission. So the specifications include the use of a steel parallel greenhouse. So we also include the production of all of the steel and the plastic used to make that greenhouse. And the scenarios we have are the reference scenario or the contentious scenario using fossil-based plastic mulching or low-density polyethylene. And the alternative scenario is potato starch-based bioplastic mulching. As you can see here, this is what we mean by mulching. Mulching is usually used to prevent other weeds from growing. So LCA is a system-based approach and looking at all the upstream and downstream effects of a product throughout its lifetime or a specified time. So usually in the goal and scope phase, we include the system boundaries, which include all of the inputs and all of the outputs that are included in our system, which is tomatoes in a greenhouse. So here, in the case of this system, we look at all of the background system on the left and the foreground system on the right, where the background system comprises of all the processes upstream of agricultural activities, such as the production of plastic film, LDPE or HDPE, and resource extraction for that plastic film and the resource extraction to make diesel and electricity. Then we have the foreground system, which comprises of all the activities on the agricultural field, such as the application of that plastic film mulch using machinery or the application of fertilizers, plant protection products, and so on. So the emissions from both systems are shown by red going out into the ecosphere or into the environment. And these red arrows imply all of the natural resources that are used and extracted from the environment that are used within the system. So we look at all of these emissions in the life cycle assessment and all of the natural resources used in the life cycle assessment. So moving on to the inventory stage, we created a life cycle inventory, which defines all the inputs and all the outputs from the system. And listed here are some of the important inputs used for cherry tomato production per 1 hectare of tomatoes. So for the contentious and alternative inputs, we have 194 kilograms per hectare of LDPE mulching with a thickness of 0.012 millimeters. And we also have 186 kilograms per hectare of bioplastic with a thickness of 0.025 millimeters. So we have other inputs that are important: water, electricity, plant protection products, fertilizers, and machinery use. This lists only a few. We also have the inventory for the outputs per 1 hectare of tomatoes. Here, the outputs include emissions from the foreground system or from the background system, but here is just from the foreground system, where important emissions come from fertilizer application, such as ammonia, nitrogen oxides, dinitrogen monoxide, and from plant protection product application like copper or sulfur. We also have nitrates from fertilizers, phosphorus from fertilizers, and copper and sulfur from plant protection product application. So using that inventory, we were able to estimate the results, which I will present on the next few slides. So here we have the results for the fossil-based plastic mulching scenario, which is CONT, or for contentious, and the alternative bioplastic mulching scenario, which is ALT. So this is for greenhouse tomatoes. The impact categories we assessed, or sometimes I may just refer to them as categories, include climate change, land use potential, ozone depletion, acidification potential, freshwater eutrophication potential, marine eutrophication, freshwater ecotoxicity, and fossil-based resource depletion. So as you can see here, there is no clear winner in terms of environmental performance, where the alternative scenario performs better in land use potential, ozone depletion, and fossil-based resource depletion, but may perform worse or similar to the contentious scenario in climate change, acidification, eutrophication, and ecotoxicity. So an important parameter that can influence the results we found was the thickness of the bioplastic. So Krystyna and her team produced a film of 25 micrometers or 0.025 millimeters. And whereas a fossil-based plastic mulching is usually 12 micrometers. So the thickness, if the thickness was reduced, the impacts could also be reduced. So a hotspot in bioplastic production was actually the cultivation of potato starch for the starch. So we found that potato production contributes across all the categories in bioplastic production due to mineral fertilizer use. So if potatoes came from waste processing from potato processing, this impact could also change. So let's have a look closely at that. So the impact assessment, here we have the contribution analysis of each process, as you can see at the bottom, in the alternative scenario. So this is one way to see what the hotspots are in the system by looking at how much they can contribute to each category that you see on the x-axis: climate change, ozone depletion, and so on. So you can see one of the major hotspots is green, which refers to greenhouse structure. And this is especially due to steel production, which contributes across almost all of the categories. So in blue is plant protection product and fertilizer application emissions that come from the field. And you can see that also contributes a lot to a few of the impact categories. So in mulching in yellow, here, contributes across many of the categories, though to a little bit of a lower extent than greenhouse structure. And because it affects a lot of categories, improving this stage, this product could make a large difference in the overall picture of greenhouse tomato production. So let's look at the bioplastic. So this is the, if we focus only on the life cycle assessment of bioplastic, where we include the manufacturing of this plastic, which include the potato production, cultivation, and also the distribution of that bioplastic to the user. The final use, the use stage, which is the application using machinery onto the field, and the end of life, which is tillage into the soil because it is biodegradable. So we found that the main hotspot was this yellow one, and also a little bit of the manufacturing polymerization. So we assumed that the potato production in the manufacturing of feedstock includes potato cultivation. So we assumed that virgin potato starch was used, meaning that potatoes were grown especially to produce bioplastic. So as I said before, if we use potato starch from potato processing, we could reduce this significantly. So why is this so high? Potato cultivation usually uses, like many agricultural products, uses many different types of inputs such as diesel, machinery, fertilizers, pesticides, and so on. And to produce many different emissions, and they also produce many different emissions like ammonia from fertilizer application or CO2 from machinery. Thus, it is viable that this stage contributes so much to the overall life cycle of bioplastic. So if we use residual starch, this potato production stage would no longer be part of the system, as the starch would be sourced from a waste. We're not actually including the potato cultivation. We're not cultivating it for the actual bioplastic. Instead, if we use it from waste, from potato processing, we would not include the potato production stage. So thus effectively lowering the impact of bioplastic altogether, which is an important point to take into account, and therefore lower the environmental impact of the tomato production if we are looking at improving the bioplastic. Finally, the interpretation stage, which also act as my conclusions. So some important conclusions that we found is that the origin of the starch for the bioplastic is very important. So whether we are using virgin starch or residual starch from potato processing. Also, the thickness of the bioplastic film has a large influence on the results. So if we reduce the thickness from 0.025 millimeters to 0.015 millimeters, we can reduce the impacts by around 40%. So these are very important conclusions and points of improvement that the bioplastic film can be improved. So the limitations and further research include the fact that we use general emission factors for bioplastic degradation. So if we had more specific information about what emissions and how much emissions were given out, like CO2, then we can improve in this fact. And also, we did not include the impacts related to microplastics. So this is a very important point when we are trying to compare bioplastics to petroleum-based plastics like LDPE. So LDPE, or plastics from fossil fuels, generally create plastic pollution because a lot of the mulch is left on the field even after recollection. And in general, if they collect it from the field, they often cannot be recycled because of the amount of fertilizers or the amount of contaminants that are on it from pesticides. So this can affect the plastic pollution, can affect human toxicity, ecotoxicity, and ecosystem services. So this is not yet modeled or included in LCA, and it can also affect soil quality and macro and microbiota. Also, there are many ways to positively manage bioplastic waste compared to the fossil-based plastic. So fossil-based plastic is very difficult to manage. It usually ends up in the landfill, can affect the amount of pollution that comes out from it. Whereas bioplastic waste, it can be managed in many different ways, like anaerobic digestion, compost, and tillage, compared to the fossil-based plastic, which is usually in the landfill or incinerated. So these different types of managements were not included. The only one included was the tillage. So this assessment also only focuses on the environmental impacts. So the cost and time taken to remove fossil-based plastic at its end of life was not included. And the fact that fossil-based plastic at its end of life has higher costs and higher time than bioplastics. That is also a very important point to include, especially for the farmers. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anna Bogush, and I'm Associate Professor at Center of Agroecology, Water and Resilience at Coventry University. My background is chemistry and physical chemistry, and I did my PhD in geochemistry. I'm working mainly on understanding fates of different pollutants, including microplastic, in natural and anthropogenic system, and also developing technology for waste remediation and waste recycling, using concept of circular economy. This presentation will be about microplastic in agriculture, a growing concern and potential solution. Yes, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization published a report, Assessment of Agriculture Plastics and Their Sustainability, a Call for Action, in 2021. Where this authors, experts collected data about plastic pollution in agriculture and associated value chain. For example, there are several statements. At least 12.5 million tons of plastic were used globally in agriculture production annually, while another 37.3 million were used in food packaging. Crop production and livestock accounted for 10.2 million tons per year collectively, followed by fishery and aquaculture with 2.1 million, and forestry with 0.2 million tons. Moreover, without viable alternatives, plastic demand in agriculture is only set to increase. And for example, also data suggested that only a small fraction of agriculture plastic are collected and recycled, predominantly in developing economies. There is evidence that elsewhere most plastic are burnt, buried, and landfilled, leading to greenhouse gas emission, microplastic pollution, and other chemical pollutions. While plastic can be beneficial to agriculture, its widespread use also raises concern about its impact on public health and the environment when it degrades. At present, there is no common agreed definition of plastic size category, as different researchers have used a different size range. It depends upon the chosen analytical methods and field of study. And for example, here on this figure, you can see different size range for nanoplastic, microplastic, mesoplastic, and macroplastic. And generally, microplastic is a small piece of plastic with size ranged from 1 micron to 5 millimeters. There are several different sources of microplastic. For example, on this figure, you can see on figure A, there is a primary microplastic. It's a plastic particles that were manufactured to be a particular size. For example, here you can see beads of polypropylene sized at around 5 millimeters. There are another examples like noodles, fibers for cosmetics, household cleaners, and other products. On the right figure, you can see secondary microplastic. There are small, very small dots, and also microfibers. There secondary microplastic. It's a piece of plastic that have been degraded from larger items. For example, fragments of plastic mulch and bags, packaging, fibers, pellets, and etc. And we can find a lot of secondary microplastic in the environment, for example, in soil. The pathway and impact of plastic, microplastic and nanoplastic on agro-ecosystem, food safety and human health, including their potential for transference and accumulation along the food chain and agro-food system. There is strong evidence that agriculture plastics used on land cause microplastic pollution that can then disperse to other environment. And for example, here you can see different sources how microplastic can transport in natural system. It's, for example, by wind. Also, it can deposit to the soil or water systems. Also during flood events. Also under irrigation. Microplastic can be dispersed through water to soil, and also degradation of plastic mulch through municipal waste degradation, and also from sludge and fertilizer. And you know maybe that sludge from wastewater treatment plants, they contaminate by microplastic, and when people use sludge as the fertilizer, for example, for land application, they can disperse microplastic to soil. And it's very difficult to remove that microplastic from soil. What can be the impact of pollution of microplastic in soil? For example, it can impact on animals and plants. And for example, on crops as well, grass, spring onion, and wheat, there are evidence that microplastic can be present in these crops. Also, soil microbes can absorb nanoplastic and microplastic. Worms and isopods, there are evidence and published papers about this. And also microplastic can transport through the soil column and reach groundwater. Yeah, microplastic, it's also a potential impact to human health. And there are 3 ways how microplastic can reach a human. How microplastic can impact to human health. First, it's physical. It's ingested microplastic could damage internal structure, tissues, and organs. Chemicals like plastic contains potential toxic chemicals like stabilizers, fillers, plasticizers, pigments that used for plastic production, which could be released in the human body during degradation. Also, microplastic can absorb and transport other potentially toxic chemicals like heavy metals, organic and other organic pollutants. Biological impact is when microorganisms can be attached to microplastic, forming biofilms on the surface of plastic, and they can cause harm to human health. For example, to increase some diseases. And you can see there are many published works about this microplastic impact to human health. There are many evidence, but there are also many gaps that people need to understand further. Therefore, to prevent further microplastic pollution in agriculture, the traditional model of industrial activity like linear economy, where we take resources, make some products, use these products, and then just throw them away, should be transformed to circular economy. And holistic approach to integrate circular economy includes interconnection and development in economic, education, government, society, science, technology, and innovation, and environmental aspects. Thus, policy option to reduce plastic environmental impact should ideally target multiple steps in the value chain through a combination of intervention based on 6R model. Yeah, 6R model include refuse, reduce, redesign, reuse, recycle, and recover. Yeah, depending on the application, this could include adoption, agriculture, particle practice that avoids the use of plastic, eliminating the most polluting plastic products, substitute plastic products with natural or biodegradable alternatives, promoting reusable plastic products, improve waste management practice, adopting new business models, establish and enforcing moderate extended producers responsibility schemes for collection and management of agricultural plastics, introduce better way to manage or reuse plastic waste, and to also drive behavior change within the supply chain and among users and consumers. I can give you an examples for mulching films. For example, for mulching films, when people assess this material, they conclude that it's possible to promote conventional organic mulching techniques, also redesign to biodegradable films. And another option is ban polyvinyl chloride films. And polyvinyl chloride films, it's mainly polypropylene used for mulching materials. But sometimes in some countries, they still use polyvinyl chloride. And in the event that used polyvinyl chloride films, when they burned on farms or at dump sites, they would be a significant source of polychlorinated dibenzopyridioxins and polychlorinated dibenzofurans. Both of these organic pollutants are under the Stockholm Convention as persistent organic pollutants, and it's better to maybe to ban this type of mulching materials at all. And also people try to assess other agricultural plastic products and also try to think how they can use 6R models for these products to improve circularity of these materials in agriculture system. You have already listened some presentations about different options like alternative, natural alternatives and biodegradable alternatives, and also about biodegradable bioplastic. And under Organic Plus project, we are running experiments because for biodegradable bioplastic, it's great materials, but there are still some gaps that we need to understand further. For example, biodegradability of biodegradable bioplastic in outdoor field condition, because main standards for biodegradability, they based on laboratory experiments. But it's very important to understand how these materials can biodegrade under natural condition, different temperature, different soil type, different climate zones, and etc. For these experiments, the main goal of this research is to understand the process of biodegradable bioplastic biodegradation, their time scales, and the risk of accumulation of microplastic and associated pollutants in outdoor field condition. Here on the photos, you can see our experiments, how we set up it. And for these experiments, the pod experiments was started in March 2021. Two types of biodegradable bioplastic were selected for the field trials, and polyethylene was used for comparison as a virgin plastic mulch materials. Untreated soil was used as a control, and each experiments is in 3 replicates and also 2 states, like plastic mulch film, a piece of plastic mulch films were put on the surface of the soil and also inside the soil. And now we are in a stage of, we collected results after 6 months, and you can see some examples of mulching pieces in 3 different times. For example, at the beginning, after 3 months, and after 6 months. Polyethylene under A, it's that were present on the surface of the soil, and I, it's indicated for the pieces that were inside the soil. For polyethylene, we after 6 months we can see almost no differences, and no weight loss and other changes in the materials. But for biodegradable bioplastic, you can see underneath. For example, a biodegradable bioplastic that was on the surface of the soil, we visibly you can't see any differences. But for example, after 6 months, we observed 10% loss of weight of this piece of the plastic, and it indicates that biodegradation process started. For the piece that we put inside the soil, we see more changes. For example, we can see discoloration of the plastic mulch. It means that pigments, the black pigments that were used for this mulch materials production were removed, were degraded or leached out from this material. And also weight. We observed weight loss of this piece of about 20%. It seems comparing to mulching films that we have on the surface of the soil, its biodegradation process is higher for the pieces that we put inside the soil. Yeah, this is just some initial results, and we also measure how these materials change chemically during the degradation process, both physical and chemical and biological. And we are going to do to do this experiment for about 3 years, but we'll see the changes and we'll present results maybe in papers in the future. Yeah, I think that's all for me. Thank you so much for your attention.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lucius Tamm. I'm coordinator of RELAX, of the RELAX project, and I'm happy to tell you a few things of what we've achieved and can contribute to our overall objectives. RELAX stands for Replacement of Contentious Inputs in Organic Farming Systems. It's the sister project to Organic Plus. Our objective was to evaluate solutions and to further reduce the use of external inputs and to develop and adopt cost-efficient and environmentally safe tools and technologies too, and that's the important point, to reduce the use of copper and mineral oil in plant protection, to identify sustainable sources of plant nutrition, and to provide solutions to support livestock health and welfare. And our concept from the beginning was, of course, to build on results of previous research projects and to take far advanced solutions forward. So that's the underlying concept. We have included 13 European countries. of academia, research institutions, but more importantly also many farmers associations to do on-farm research. So we have quite a large-scale consortium involving many stakeholders from different groups. Okay, this is the group photo of our consortium when we started off, and all the contributing partners there, including one of Spain. But I would like to put our activities in a broader context related to what we need to do to move forward with organic farming. So as you all know, there are some global challenges for agriculture. So like soil degradation and climate change, water use and pollution, but also loss of biodiversity. But nowadays also in the political situation, the yield security issue has become very important again. So we have to comply and contribute to these overall objectives to provide yields, but also to reduce the environmental impact. And as you all know, organic farming contributes or performs quite well if it comes to productivity in subsistence and smallholder farms. It creates value, added value in food chains. It has all sorts of benefits to the environment. But there is the famous yield gap, and this is one of the problems we are facing and which we have to address. And I'll come to that in a second. The benefits of organic farming and its potential contribution to agriculture have been recognized at the EU level and in many member states, in particular in Europe. And therefore the Farm to Fork strategy foresees very ambitious goals to upscale organic farming to 25% until 2030. And what you can see here in this graph, this means a tremendous increase of the surface in a short period of time. And this puts all sorts of challenges to us, to the actors, on how to achieve this transition and how to achieve these objectives. It's logistics, it's training, it's market, all aspects of the organic sector are involved. So when we talk about challenges to organic farming, then I would say we need to increase productivity to close the yield gap while retaining the benefits to the environment. So we have to avoid the collateral damage to the environment. We also have to replace problematic practices, and this is what Organic Plus and Relax are about. And we also have to find ways to allow for upscaling for organic farming. So that's also a major challenge in logistics. The timeline of Relax was when we started off. We started off with data collection. You know, where do we stand? What's the state of the art? We identified the needs in surveys. What is used right now? What are the alternatives? We did develop and customize available alternatives. We tested them on farm in various countries and contexts. We also looked at the socio-economic, environmental, and acceptance issues for novel solutions. And we've also developed roadmaps to be presented to the European Union on how to implement those alternatives if it's possible, and on how to reduce the use of contentious inputs. The state of play is, yes, we see, in a nutshell, yes, we see that there are alternative tools and technologies, and they may contribute to the reduction of these contentious inputs in many cases, not all. The transition to improved management practices has to involve all players along the value chain. That's totally clear. There is a different potential for introduction of alternatives, but there are also different bottlenecks in each case which may hinder the transition. So they need to be identified in each case. We need tailored support strategies from the policy side, because else nothing will change. We also identified actions that are needed at the EU level to encourage the use of alternatives and to encourage the reduction of contentious inputs. And as I said, we have drafted some roadmaps to reduce the use of contentious inputs. And those roadmaps, they have to be fair, reliable, and also implementable. It's no use to claim everything is fine if there are serious problems. What I want to raise here is we've addressed some aspects, but if we want to improve organic farming and further introduce further innovations in organic farming, really to address the demands from the world, to feed the world and so on, then it's not only about technological innovation, it's really also about social innovation and ecological innovation. And these are aspects we have not addressed in RELAX because that was not the purpose. But we have to keep in mind that these other avenues or roads for innovation need to be addressed too in order to achieve major progress for organic farming and agriculture in general.
Bueno, doncs fins aquí les ponències d'avui. Ara és el torn de paraula, val? Podeu escriure la pregunta al xat, que us apareixerà a la pantalla. I, sisplau, avui estic sola traduint, per tant, tot i que la Joana m'ajudarà, em donarà un cop de mà amb la selecció de les preguntes, però si ja indiqueu a qui va dirigida la pregunta, ens faciliteu molt poder gestionar tot el xat, val? Okay, now it's your turn to ask. You can type the question in the chat that will appear in the bottom side of the screen. Please indicate to whom the question is addressed in order to facilitate the answer. Avui tenim amb nosaltres, s'han pogut connectar la Erika Montemayor, la Krystyna Malińska, l'Anna Bogush, el Francis Rayns i la Judith Conroy. Today, they have been able to connect and stay with us to answer your questions. Erika Montemayor, Krystyna Malińska, Anna Bogush, Francis Rayns and Judith Conroy. I, sisplau, demanaré als ponents que em responguin a poc, perquè avui estic sola, i que em donin temps per traduir després de cada concepte, al final de la resposta, per facilitar-ho i fer-ho més àgil. Today I am alone translating the questions, so I will ask you all, the speakers, to answer slowly, first of all, and then to give me time to translate after each concept you explain and not wait until the end. If you can explain a concept, I translate it, and then you keep going on. I think it would be easy. And you all, you can, Anna, Francis, Judith, and Krystyna, you can connect your cameras and your microphones. And the people that the attendees can type your questions in the chat. Tots podeu anar ja escrivint les vostres preguntes, que apareixeran en el xat. I hem demanat a la Krystyna, aquí tenim la Krystyna Malińska. Hi, Krystyna. And hem demanat a la Krystyna, a l'Anna Bogush, a la Judith Conroy i al Francis que es connectin. La Erika Montemayor, no sé, m'ha dit que es connectaria, però al final no sé si ha pogut... No sé si, Joana, si l'has vist, la Erika Montemayor?
No.
No la veus, eh? Vale. Bé, potser es connecta durant...
Sí, perquè hem començat una mica abans el xat.
Ok. Sí. Hi, Francis, and hi, Anna. Thank you to be with us for today's questions slot. At the moment, there is no questions, so we hope people get...
Sí, ya la primera pregunta. Diu, les presentacions que s'han presentat per substituir les cobertes de plàstic, voldria saber si serien aplicables a diferents climes o el clima influiria en la seva degradació. Gràcies.
Okay, it's a general question. They say if the plastics that you had been trying in your trials could be used in other climate areas, or if the climate, like the climate or the weather, it affects to the degradation of the covers. I don't know if maybe Krystyna, you can answer to that, or
yeah, Judith, turn yours off.
Well, I can try to answer this question, but I think that Francis might have a better understanding of this, since he had these field trials in UK, and also the plastic mulching films were tested in Turkey and in Poland. But definitely biodegradable plastic mulches which we developed could be used in different climates, as we tested them in UK, Turkey, and Poland. They biodegraded a little bit differently. I think that the temperature and the weather conditions actually really matter when it comes to biodegradation during the vegetation season. So yes, definitely. The temperature, moisture content, humidity, and all the factors really matter. I think that Francis would probably add more to it since he was involved in field trials in UK.
Vale. Wait a minute, Francis, I translate. Krystyna, okay?
Oh, and then, sorry. I forgot about that. I'm so sorry.
No, don't worry. It's okay. That has been okay. Vale, la Krystyna comenta que el Francis potser, que ara ens contestarà i ampliarà una miqueta i potser en sap una mica més, però ells els assajos que han estat fent ha sigut a Polònia i al Regne Unit, i realment el ritme de degradació ha sigut diferent. Per tant, està convençuda que realment la humitat i la temperatura afecten a la degradació d'aquests plàstics. Go on.
Yes, I think Krystyna's right. It will depend on the temperature and the moisture content, and also on the kind of the biological activity of the soil. If it's a very, if it's like very poor degraded soil with very low organic matter, very low soil life, things will happen much more slowly than if it's a kind of a rich soil with lots of microbial activity going on in it.
Ell diu que, òbviament, el que ha comentat la Krystyna, que la humitat i la temperatura afecten, però que també l'activitat biològica que hi hagi al sòl afecta. Per tant, sòls més rics, que hi ha més activitat biològica, la degradació serà més ràpida, i en canvi, amb sòls més pobres o les èpoques en què hi ha menys activitat biològica, la degradació serà més lenta.
I also can comment a little bit about biodegradability of different plastics in different climate zones. I think it's very important also soil composition and microbiological composition. And as we can see from our experiments for biodegradability of mulching films in soil, for example, there is a difference between mulching films that we used on surface and inside the soils, and it seems biodegradability it's higher when it's incorporated in soil. That's why I think it's there are a large influence of microbiology, microbes community in the soil, and also I think soil composition can influence. Moisture content.
L'Anna ens complementa, ella diu que sí, que la composició del sòl, no només la microbiologia, sinó la composició del sòl i, òbviament, la microbiologia, sobretot del sòl, afecta. Han fet proves posant el mulching en superfície i enterrant aquest mulching i realment han vist moltes diferències. El grau de descomposició un cop enterrat és molt més ràpid que si el deixes o l'abandones o quan s'acaba el cultiu el deixes en superfície, no? I que realment la humitat és un dels factors clau que ella destacaria en aquesta degradació. Anything else to add?
No, I don't think so.
That's all. Perfect.
I suppose just one thing to say is that often the mulches, if there's some mechanical damage to them, that really starts, they can be, when they're stretched over the soil, they can remain in good condition for quite a long time. But if there's like kind of birds walk over the surface and like kind of damage it mechanically, that can kind of really start the degradation process going, because that can cause it to break up into smaller pieces.
Val. El Francis complementa una mica la resposta que fins ara, i és que realment quan es deixa en superfície tampoc és el mateix deixar aquests mulchings o aquestes cobertes amb superfície senceres que, per exemple, fer algun, ell diu, algun trencament mecànic, no? Sí, trencament, bàsicament. Per tant, si, per exemple, hi passes la picadora, no? Aquest plàstic es degradarà molt més ràpid i el procés de degradació no només s'accelerarà, sinó que s'iniciarà més ràpid que si es deixa la coberta sencera.
Val. Hi ha una altra pregunta, i és que si dins d'aquests estudis alternatius als plàstics derivats dels combustibles fòssils, si n'hi han de pensats, clar, no sé molt bé si és per l'ús d'ensilatge del farratge en bales o l'ús de les bales de farratge com a mulching. No sé si ens pot aclarir la pregunta la persona que l'ha fet. En tot cas, pots demanar si han provat les bales de farratge, que serà el més probable.
Sí. They ask if in any of these studies essays you have been going on, have you ever thought about this for the silage, for the feeding of the animals? I really don't know the technical word for silage. Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. See, if you have thought about it, or even anybody that had tried about it, use this No,
sí, la pregunta la persona que l'ha fet concreta els plàstics que embolcallen
les bales, no?
Sí.
Okay. I'm working the silage bullets. Okay, I was looking for the word silage bullet. Yeah. Then if you have been, about anybody has been trying on it or doing it.
Not that I know about. I think the problem would be that they would often perhaps break down too quickly because, for wrapping it up for silage, you really want something that will be quite durable and exclude the air. And I would worry that maybe the biodegradable ones might be too biodegradable.
It can get quite warm in the silage top, and it's quite biologically active.
Yeah, I think it might be a risk. I mean, that's not to say that maybe it might be possible to develop different materials. Maybe Krystyna could say, you could have something that didn't degrade so rapidly that would be a little bit more durable. So it's kind of tailored to that use. I think as well, when the actual machines are wrapping the balls of silage up in it needs to be quite strong because it gets pulled quite tight, and it's quite a vigorous procedure. And I think the sort of material that we've used for the mulches would be too delicate, but maybe a different product could be made.
Un minut, Cristina. Ell diu que no ho han provat, però que veu com dificultós fer-ho amb els materials que estan utilitzant ara. Per una banda, el procés d'ensitjat és calent, s'escalfa molt i hi ha molta activitat microbiològica, per tant, la degradació seria molt més ràpida que fins i tot quan fem servir aquests plàstics com a mulching, com a cobertera. A més, diu que fins i tot la màquina, que per fer aquest ensitjat, les bales, realment les bales d'ensitjat sempre són molt més petites que les de palla, perquè realment les han d'apretar molt i que segurament aquests plàstics es trencarien. I llavors li preguntava, això comentava el Francis, li preguntava a la Krystyna, que ara l'escoltarem, si potser amb un altre tipus de material, potser més resistent, això podria ser possible. Krystyna, do you think that would be?
Well, actually, I agree with Judith and Francis on what they already said to this question. I think that the mulches that we developed are definitely not strong enough, and they biodegrade faster than even we expected. So I'm not really sure if they are. If they can be used for silage. I know that this is a kind of huge problem in Poland with the plastic waste that is generated from storing. So definitely this is a kind of problem that perhaps needs to be addressed in future, but I don't really know of any biodegradable plastic silage that has been developed, or if there are any projects or research on that topic. I think that definitely the material can be designed, giving different requirements for this particular application. And I think that one of the options could be that the plastic could degrade when exposed to certain conditions like light or pH or something else. It could be something to look into, but till now I'm not really sure if there is something biodegradable for silage available on the market, or whether there are projects that are addressing this issue. But definitely this is an issue when it comes to plastic waste to be handled and managed.
Vale, la Krystyna està totalment d'acord amb els comentaris que han fet el Francis i la Judit, no? Són plàstics poc resistents, amb una degradació molt ràpida, que precisament que la intenció és aquesta, no? Que s'han pensat perquè es degradin amb el temps d'una campanya, no? D'un cultiu, no? I no deixar residus, no? Llavors, clar, s'hauria d'investigar. Diu que ella, a Polònia, la Krystyna és de Polònia, hi ha un gran problema de gestió de tots aquests plàstics un cop fet servir l'ensitjat i que és una cosa que s'hauria d'investigar, però que ara ella no coneix cap assaig que estigui tractant aquest tema, tot i que creu viable dissenyar un material, però seria un material nou que seria totalment diferent al material amb el que estan treballant ells per les cobertes de cultius, i hauria de ser un plàstic que no només es degradés amb la temperatura i amb la humitat, amb la temperatura, perdoneu, i amb l'activitat, volia dir ara, microbiològica, sinó també s'hauria de vigilar el tema de la llum, de la incisió de la llum, perquè estan a l'aire lliure i els cultius els tapen, no? Com a mesura que el cultiu creix va tapant aquestes cobertes, i en aquest cas no seria així. I, a més, també vigilar el pH, ha comentat.
Yeah, I would like just to add a little bit. Silage materials usually much stronger and thicker than mulching materials. That's why if biodegradable bioplastic will be developed for silage, I think it will be very difficult to use it for home composting, and the way for for degradation will be more suitable, for example, industrial composting, where they use high temperature and specific parameters for degradation, and also possibly anaerobic digestion. Yeah, but I know several people works on this area and trying to develop materials. And yeah, of course, there are still a lot of issues to develop this material, and also to understand if it will be biodegradable in specific condition and how quick. Yeah.
L'Anna complementa una mica. Òbviament, com ja hem dit, aquest material hauria de ser un plàstic molt més dur, però alhora el que faria és que és molt més difícil de degradar, no? Seria menys biodegradable, no? O el procés hauria de ser diferent, sobretot amb el que ell ha dit amb compostatge casolà, suposo que es referia a compostatge a la granja, i en canvi, que llavors s'hauria d'igualment treure aquest compost, aquest plàstic, i fer un procés de compostatge industrial amb unes certes condicions que llavors sí que el degradarien, no? Però llavors això s'hauria de tenir en compte. També ha comentat que sí que coneix gent que està començant a treballar en aquest tema, però que òbviament no està gens desenvolupat en aquest moment. És totalment novedós, no? Però clar, òbviament s'està començant a parlar perquè és un problema, no? És un problema de residus plàstics molt grans en la ramaderia.
Vale, hi ha una altra pregunta centrada en la segona presentació que s'ha fet a la jornada. Diu, s'han provat diferents alternatives de cobertures i s'analitza la concentració de nitrogen en els sòls. Detectant que hi ha una variació d'aquest element, la pregunta és si s'hauria d'analitzar aquests canvis en el nitrogen en tots els estudis que es fan alternatives al plàstic, i si s'hauria de mirar altres nutrients per la importància que tenen els elements.
Okay, I think this question is for Judith. Is Judith? Yeah! Hi. They say that in your presentation you have been analyzing the nitrogen in the soil, and that you have found some changes. And the question is that if these changes in nitrogen, it should be interesting to look how they affect the soil, and not just the nitrogen, if you have been looking for another elements as well as the nitrogen. I don't know.
I think Francis is better for this.
Okay.
To him. He's here too.
Yes, we did measure nitrate, available nitrogen under the mulches in comparison with the control plots, which were unmulched, and there were much higher levels of available nitrogen, and I think that's partly because there was less leaching from the topsoil, because obviously the mulch film prevented the infiltration of water to the same extent, which is probably a good thing. You could say it's not always a good thing, because maybe it prevented that nitrogen from moving down to lower levels in the soil. We didn't look at other nutrients though.
Doncs ell diu que sí, que s'ha mirat el nitrogen disponible i que aquests eren més alts en les cobertures amb mulching, amb plàstic, entenc, que amb el control. Ells ho atribueixen a que hi havia menys lixiviats, perquè hi havia menys infiltració d'aigua de la pluja, i que això segurament és una bona cosa, i no han mirat altres nutrients. No sé si... Why you did not look for another nutrients or elements?
because we just didn't have time. It was too much work. We have actually, we have got some stored samples. We possibly could still consider doing it. But yeah, it was just we thought that the nitrogen would be the most interesting one to look at because that changes most rapidly under all sorts of influences of practices.
Ja. Diu que no hem mirat altres nutrients bàsicament per una manca de temps, que seria interessant, però sí que realment el nitrogen és, per una banda, el nutrient més interessant quan parlem d'agricultura i per l'altra que també és el que més canvia en el sòl d'una manera més ràpida. No? Els altres no canvien tan ràpidament i llavors no és tan probable que hi hagin canvis tan rellevants, no? Entenc? Okay. Well, there is they say thank you very much for the presentations. They were very, very interesting. Just to let you know. No sé, si no hi ha més preguntes, què et sembla, Joana?
Podem acabar aquí.
Sí? No sé. Donem un minut. We give a couple of minutes, just if someone is typing, because I think the first day or the second day, somebody write us to us, you switch off the chat, because he was writing a very long question and he didn't have time. So I don't know, we give 1 or 2 minutes if somebody's typing anything, just in case, and if not, we will start saying goodbye. Us donem 1 o 2 minuts per si algú està teclejant alguna pregunta, que l'altre dia vam deixar una persona que ens va escriure després, el vam posar després en contacte amb el ponent a qui volia fer la pregunta, vull dir que si us passa no us estresseu, m'escriviu a mi i jo us poso en contacte amb els ponents, però bueno, si ho podem resoldre aquí per tothom, doncs aquest és el plan, no? Vull dir, s'aprofita més. I si no hi ha més preguntes, doncs moltes gràcies per assistir i anirem tancant-ho tot i donant la jornada. Us recordem que les jornades estaran disponibles a la web del RuralCat, tant les jornades com els vídeos de les visites a partir del mes de juliol. Vam anar el dijous a veure el Gilad Busi, el projecte Aurora del Camp, al Maresme, i vam estar parlant també sobre diferents cobertures amb diferents tipus de plàstics i malles i d'allò. Vull dir que si us interessa el vídeo el tindrem penjat, durarà uns 30-35 minuts, més o menys, el resumirem tota la visita i és molt interessant la visió holística, general, global, que té el Gilad sobre aquest tema, sobretot el tema de la fertilitat del sòl, molt associada a la gestió de les malalties i també de les males herbes. Doncs, well, I remind you that it will be all these videos, all these journeys, all these, all the videos of the different talks and the visits. We did 2 visits last week, and we visit a project that is called Aurora del Camp here in Catalonia with Gilad Busi. And Gilad had a very interesting manage of the field. It's like a 30-35 minutes video. We resume all the visit, the almost 3 hours of visit in half hour with the most interesting things, and we will talk about as well and how he managed the weeds and the soil fertility and the mulchings as well, the different mulching that he uses, tree mulchings and as well different plastics and different kinds for different crops, and it was very interesting. So all the people that had attended, if they want in July, the video, they will be available as well as the rest of the activities we have been doing. Doncs, Joana, ho donem per tancat, això? Sí? Si qualsevol de vosaltres us queda alguna pregunta que us apareix de més tard, només m'ho heu de dir i jo us poso en contacte amb qualsevol dels ponents amb qui vulgueu resoldre-la. If anyone, we will be saying goodbye. If anyone has any questions, just contact me and I will put you in contact with the speakers of today. So Erica, Judith, Francis, Ulrich, Anna, and Krystyna, thank you very much all for being here. And see you soon.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Adéu a tots.
Yeah, it's been a massive job you organising this, so thank you. It's been really good. Thank you.
Gràcies, Judit. La Judit ens agraeix l'organització. Vinga.
Bye-bye.
Adéu. Bye.